Welcome to the Minding the Gap podcast from Behavioral Sciences of Alabama. I'm Paul Bakke, licensed counselor, and I'm alongside two doctors, Dr. David Barnhart Sr. and Dr. David Barnhart Jr. And I want to welcome everybody. We're going to talk about fight or flight, the response that we have to some kind of a threat, whether it's real or imagined, and how that works. So Dr. Barnhart Sr., I'll start with you. Why don't you talk a little bit about what happens in the brain when there's a perceived threat?
Oh, I sure will. So when there's a perceived threat, we have a defensive response. It's kind of wired in to us. It's very important to us because it's why we've lived as humans for a long time, thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So there's a fight response, which is to get ready to defend ourselves, physiological response, where we might notice an increase in respiration and heart rate, that kind of thing. Anxiety can have that same kind of reaction, but our tendency with the anxiety is moving away or trying to avoid the confrontation. So both of those are normal, part of how we survive as humans. And we end up working with both of these, both the flight, the anxiety side, and the fight side when we do counseling and psychotherapy.
Yeah, the fight part, I think, is something often we neglect when we talk about fight or flight. We often talk about, you hear in popular culture, people talk about trauma responses or people freezing or running away from something. But anger, the fight part, really does come from the idea that there's a threat. There's something either that I value that I could lose, or I feel like, my integrity is being questioned, or whatever it happens to be. Someone cuts me off. Even the language we use, like someone cuts me off. That's not actually, no one cut anything. There was a car that moved in front of your car and you had to slow down. That's what happened. Mm-hmm. But we like the violent language of being cut off. Mm-hmm. Like I'm being thwarted. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we feel like if we just, people will even talk about it, like, I have to vent. I have to let this pressure out. And that's oftentimes, sometimes that can help, but frequently it actually just makes it worse. You start yelling, you get angrier.
Yeah. And in the case of the car, the danger is over.
Yes.
They've already cut you off.
It's done.
It's now safe. There is no more threat, but that feeling remains.
Yes.
So there's a compulsion to, put your hand up and show a finger.
Yeah.
This arbitrary thing, show a finger.
Yeah.
As the old Seinfeld little bit goes, what is this finger thing, that we do? And
it is interesting in that you said it's a compulsion, our tendency, and we tend to go to that, whatever we've associated with our ability to, quote, solve the problem or avoid the situation. It really gets wired in, and it's difficult to control, but it'll tend to repeat itself.
Well, and there's especially when it's a perceived slight, like I'm angry at someone. Mm-hmm. The idea of me yelling at them or insulting them or putting them in their place is like somehow my position has been threatened. I got to push you down a little bit so that I can feel better about myself. And it doesn't actually work that way. Usually just makes me angrier.
Therapeutically, if we can learn how to down regulate, which we can learn to down regulate that, then it helps us to function better. Mm-hmm. I think, Paul, you do an illustration from a movie that I think is excellent.
I love this example of A League of Their Own movie. Most people that are some kind of adult age, if you have seen this movie, it's a really popular movie about the girls' baseball team. And the manager, Tom Hanks's character, his name is Jimmy, he's prone to anger, and one of his players makes a bad throw, throws to the wrong base. The run scores, they lose the lead because she made a bad decision and a bad throw. And as many coaches will do, starts yelling at her about how terrible she is and how much she costs the team and so forth. So he's raising her voice at this woman that's come in, and she starts crying. And he famously says, "Are you crying?" And she's afraid. And now she's has a threat. His threat is that she's cost the team and she's made this mistake that's just unacceptable in baseball. And now it's unacceptable that she's crying. So she's dealing with her threat of him, and he is dealing with her threat of crying and mistake. So, and he remembers, there's no crying in baseball. My managers yelled at me. They called me blah, 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 blah. And my parents had come to the game. They come all the way from Michigan to see me. And did I cry? No. And she's just, and so then the team starts recognizing that this is not helping. Hey, Jimmy, hey, come on. And then he yells at them. And the umpire comes in, sees if he can help. He gives them pretty good advice. Why don't you treat these young ladies like they're your daughter? That doesn't help him because he's in threat mode. So then he insults the umpire, and the umpire throws him out of the game. So his anger just continues to escalate and escalate and escalate. And it was all in an effort to relieve this built up tension, like you were talking about, Dave. Mm-hmm. So we go to the championship game, and the stakes are even higher than this one. The championship game, this is for all of it. And if you YouTube it, you just there's no crying in baseball, easy. You can just go watch it. And then this one is called Jimmy Tries to Find a Better Way to Reprimand this player. Jimmy Tries to Find a Better Way. It'll be right there. She makes the same mistake. She throws the ball to the wrong base. It goes, they score. It's early in the game. They get the final out, and he's angry. So his feeling didn't change. He was still really angry that she didn't learn from his lesson that he was trying to give her in this moment. But he is really working hard at trying to manage the emotion of anger at the time. And you can tell it's really difficult for him. And so he yells, Evelyn, I think is her name, Evelyn, is this. And of course, Tom Hanks is an amazing actor. And so he just pulls this off just to perfection. He pulls her over to him, and he says, really trying to suppress his anger, he says, "You're still missing the cutoff man." She's like, she's ready for him to unleash on her. He's really trying. "I would like for you to work on that before next season." And she recognizes, and you see her kind of soften, and she kind of smiles and says, "Okay, thank you." And she toddles off, and he's still fuming inside, and you could just see his face go from just a couple of more shakes, and then he's okay. He outlasted the anger. He didn't escalate it and make it worse. And that's really what we try to help people recognize, is that if you just wait, if you just suppress that venting and yelling about it, and it's just gonna make it worse. It's just feel that for a short period of time, and it will come down. Don't say anything when you're angry. Just don't say anything.
Practice.
Just
People say, oh, you don't want to suppress your feelings or, that idea. Sometimes it's good to do that. Don't talk, don't communicate in that moment, because if you do, it's probably going to be threat-based, fear-based.
Mhm.
You're
Yeah.
so wrong, all these things that end up not being good for relationships.
Right. And it just self-stimulating. So the anger, our own angry words feed into this whole loop. And I love that example, Paul. That's a great example. And of course, therapeutically, we do this work a little bit differently, but the concept is the same. And once you learn how to do it, it transfers to other areas of our lives. So we actually can get better. Not only can we reduce anxiety when we face situations that we're concerned about, but we can also learn how to reduce the anger. Same areas of the brain
Yeah.
are involved in the fight or flight response.
It sounds to me like Paul also, what you said about him writing it out too just made me think about the fact that the anger is still there. I mean, you're still feeling the anger. It's not, we talk about controlling emotions like I'm not going to feel this. Part of it's you recognize I'm still feeling this. I'm recognizing a threat, and I can feel myself being angry about it, but I can ride that instead of it riding me. I mean, that's part of
Right.
the thing there.
Right.
Yeah.
And the chemicals that are going through your brain that's making you feel that way,
Mm-hmm.
they're not just going to suddenly go away, but they will eventually. It won't continue to go up.
Yeah.
If you just wait, and for different people, it's going to be different levels of time. The more you work on your emotional regulation, the better you can manage it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the feeling isn't going to just go away immediately. You just do have to sit there with it until it subsides by itself and on its own time.
So and it's going to happen. That's how we're made. So the chemistry changes. The body tends to go back to a homeostatic state. So eventually, parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, etc. So it's just waiting. If we can think about that as allowing the chemistry to really change in our own bodies, like breathing. I mean, breathing can help kick in the parasympathetic nervous system, so we can help ourselves relax. Going for a walk, get the blood pumping, eliminate that chemistry a little more quickly, create some new chemistry. We can do all kinds of things to help us get through that time frame.
And that's where, Dave, you were talking about when someone someone's out in some situation that they don't like, with the kids out there with his parents, and they're doing an activity and the kid is not having it, doesn't want to do it, doesn't want to do this and then we're going to do this activity as a family, and the kid is starting to complain about it, and then just starts, it's how terrible it is, and blah, the complaining is just focusing on how terrible it is.
Yeah.
This focus on how bad this is right now and how upset I am about having to do this is not helping anything. So you work with the child on accepting those kinds of things, sitting with that feeling, redirecting your attention towards something else, that sitting there and talking about it and leaning right into how terrible this is as a way to change it. It doesn't help because there you are in this activity, and it's not changing.
Yeah. That reminds me of the story. I've sometimes shared the story about the two boats. So the guy the Buddhist monk that's trying to meditate, and so everyone's on his case, and he decides he's going to go out in the middle of a lake and meditate. So he gets in a boat and pushes off, and he's meditating, feeling really peaceful, and he feels this bump, and he knows, as soon as he feels it, he knows there's some yokel fisherman as isn't watching where he's going and has bumped into him, and he opens his eyes and he's ready to tear into this fisherman and just tell him what a jerk he is. And he looks over and the boat's empty, and all his anger just evaporates. And it's like all that, like we tend to think that made me angry, instead of the fact that I'm generating all this. Like this is a story in my head, and I'm reacting to it. But that boat is empty, and of course in the Buddha story, he suddenly realizes, oh, my boat's empty too, because the whole idea is when we're just reacting, we're not acting consciously, we're just reacting. But that's definitely like, this is something I'm generating anyway.
And so that's why it's important, especially when we can't help the feeling. We know what triggers us, different things as you live life. You understand, okay, these kinds of things bother me.
Yeah.
How do you get ahead of that? How do you practice accepting some of those situations? How do you practice, because if you just wait until the moment to work on it, you're probably going to do the same thing. So how can you get ahead of those situations?
That's good. That's why people go
one
to
example I like to use. Go ahead, Dr. Barnard.
No, you go ahead. You're right.
Well, one example that I use a lot is during COVID. We were just completely dependent on Zoom for sessions. So, and my computer at the time just kept dying, and I would get anxious about making people wait. And I'd see the pinwheel going around, and and I'm, of course, like any good red-blooded American, you yell at your computer. You yell at your computer, use a couple cuss words, and stomp and God, and all this stuff. And I realized this is not helping any. My computer didn't work better, and I didn't feel better either. It didn't help, right? So I thought, I gotta do better, because I can't. It's the one I have in the moment. You got to deal with it. So I was teaching someone a meditation, and it was called the back to one meditation, where you count to 10, you count your breaths 1 to 10, and then you go back to 1. If you get distracted, you go back to 1. And I was teaching someone this meditation, and at the same time, while we were doing this together, I was thinking about the things like the computer pinwheel spinning around, and the error message, and the blue screen, and all. I could purposefully putting those in my mind as I'm counting and breathing, and just practicing noticing this spike in anger and frustration that these things evoked. Noticing them, not trying to change them. I was an 8, I was a 9, I was a 6. Trying to just notice the feeling that was connected with this really upsetting thing with me. My whole goal was, let me see if I can get used to this. These stimuli. Later on that afternoon, amazingly enough, I log on after lunch, typically when it goes down, error messages, pinwheels, same stuff. And I thought, well, I guess I'm going to have to wait about 10 minutes until the computer gets right. I didn't cuss, I'd practiced accepting the trigger, connecting it with counting and breathing, some kind of activity that's connected with acceptance, noticing. So maybe we can comment a little bit on that too.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good example of the advantage to being able to do what we get to do, because we work to apply that. And it demonstrates that it does work. It also gives us some really good stories, like that one.
Yeah, yeah. We gotta use it in our lives all the time.
Well, and it strikes me also, Paul, like you were talking about, like, so that's a computer. Like when you're in an interpersonal thing, and you're dealing with a person, and someone has a habit that bothers you, and part of it is you learn this if you are married or have kids, or you're just in a relationship with someone, they're going to do things that annoy you. And sometimes part of it's getting used to that. And part of it's also learning to approach your own anger with them in a way and then you have greater intimacy. Like, when you said that, it really hurt my feelings.
Right.
And suddenly we
Right.
have something to talk about instead of me blowing up.
Right. Or criticizing.
Or criticizing.
Yeah.
Are you too lazy to pick your darn towel
Yeah.
off the bathroom floor?
How are you going to do? How people deal with criticism?
Yeah.
They're going to defend themselves.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
because it's a threat. It's like you're attacking my character.
Exactly.
That's a good point. Because the consequence is not just to the person who's getting more upset about the computer. The consequences of a broken relationship and a disconnected relationship.
Yeah.
And so learning how to either hold on, gather yourself, and complain respectfully.
Yeah.
Ask for what you want in that, then criticize or just avoid it and not ever talk about it and build a resentment that just, comes out later.
Yeah.
It's okay to be angry about those things. It's how you respond and react to it. And thoughtfully is typically the best way rather than just the reaction.
And it requires that we stop and reflect. We have to be able to think about what it is we're going to do, but also to simulate it. I mean, the example you had, Paul, was really a very helpful example to talk about how you were dealing with it, what you did to help yourself be okay with that. What do they call that? That deadly spinning ball thing?
Spinny ball of doom, whatever.
Yes, whatever that thing is.
Nobody likes it when they see that thing.
No, that's everybody shares.
You have to wait. We don't wait in this society. We want things right now.
Exactly. But I think you've just given us a cue that we could all use. Just look forward to that spinning ball, and here's another opportunity to practice waiting, being patient.
Opportunity to practice.
Yeah. Is that the last word?
That sounds good. That's a good last word.
I think so.
All right. Well, good. Well, thanks everybody for watching Minding the Gap podcast, and hopefully we're helping you mind your gaps with thoughtful responses rather than just reactions, especially ones out of anger.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul.